Good morning. Today's Friday, May 20th, 2022. We will be sitting in the chamber this morning at approximately 10 a.m. The Honorable Myrna Dreger in the chair, and have a good day.
So she probably graduated with my brother, my older brother. Okay. My older brothers were 94, 95, I think. Yeah. Yeah, so she would have been the same class as my older brother. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Good morning, everybody. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. At this time, we invite the ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber. Could the Minister and Critic please introduce their staff in attendance? Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joined by my Deputy, Catherine Gerard, and the Assistant Deputy Minister, Melissa Ballantyne from Finance and Corporate Services, and Assistant Deputy Minister, Michelle Wallace, Industry Programs and Partnerships.
As previously stated, in accordance with Sub-Rule 77, subsection 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you. So last time we chatted and discussed during the estimates process, I ended with some questions around minimum wage, and recognizing that minimum wage is not the minister's responsibility, usually under the Minister of Finance, but it will undoubtedly have an impact on the economy and on labor markets. It's been stated this government is concerned with the labor shortage, and so wanted to get the minister's perspective on the low minimum wage that we have here, soon to be the lowest in the country come October, and the impact that will have on the economy in Manitoba, with specific comment on the labor market in Manitoba.
The Honourable Minister.
Not yet.
Will speak in a moment.
Geez,
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the members' information, I know we did some work, the department has done some work compiling some information from Statistics Canada, the Fraser Institute, as well as some labor force survey data, and made some projections modeling data. Unfortunately, this is a couple years old, so dates back to 2019. We could probably make some interpretations of where we're at now in terms of today's labor market. I'd say it probably has changed somewhat since then. Obviously, there's a real demand for labor, which I think is clearly driving up wages. But just for the members' information, back in 2019, and these are Manitoba numbers, they found that it was most common, it was the younger workers working part-time while living at home and attending school were those that were making minimum wage. So 2019 figures, they estimated just over 31,000 Manitobans were minimum wage earners, which at that time was about 5.6% of the total workforce, and was estimated that just over half of those workers were part-time, and a little less than half were full-time. So about close to 18,000 part-time, approximately 14,000 full-time. And more than half of those workers were in that 15 to 24 age category, and then another 34% were in the working age employees, the 25 to 54. It was predicted at that time that just over half of the minimum wage earners had a high school education or less, and about 30% have completed a post-secondary education. And further, most minimum wage earners are a son or daughter or relative living with their family, which was over half, and almost half had other household arrangements, including as a couple, a lone household head, or single. In 2019, I would suggest, and I would be very interested in what percentage of the workforce are actually on minimum wage now. In my discussions with the business community, there is a tremendous demand for labor, and they're telling me that they're being forced to pay increasingly higher salaries to employ people and keep people employed. So I would expect that we would have less than that 5.6 percentage of the workforce actually on minimum wage. We're certainly digging into this a little deeper, see if we can get some more up-to-date numbers in respect of minimum wage and who in fact and how many are on minimum wage here in Manitoba. We are certainly open to having a discussion about minimum wage here in Manitoba. We are doing some work, having a look at what other jurisdictions are doing in terms of their changes to minimum wage. Certainly that's all part of it. And I think the other thing that we're looking at too is historically, and I think the trend still exists, Manitoba has the lowest cost of living anywhere in the country. So that certainly can be a Manitoba advantage for sure. So there's a lot of factors to bring into play here. We are doing some work on it, across government to see what the impacts of changing minimum wage would be. But we're prepared to have those conversations and do that work.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
So by the minister's statement, I think he acknowledges that there is a labor shortage in. Oh yes, thank you for the reminder. I'll take the opportunity to introduce my staff here, Rylan Ramnares, who's joined me today. To follow up on my question, the minister's, during his previous response, said there is a labor shortage that we're facing here in Manitoba. I think that's pretty clear. And the minister also said that to address this shortage, private sector is being forced to increase their wages and pay higher to attract labor into the positions that they're trying to fill. And so wouldn't that same principle apply when the government is trying to address and solve the labor shortage problem, that we should increase wages for workers in order to attract them into these jobs? And the wage that the provincial government controls is the minimum wage. So if we're trying to address the labor shortage in Manitoba, wouldn't the minister follow the same principle that the private sector is taking to solve the problem by increasing the minimum wage to address the labor shortage we're facing?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things I do want to point out in respect. Again, these are 2019 statistics. Manitoba actually at the 5.6% rate of minimum wage earners in comparison to across the country was at 10.4%. So almost double the rate across the country versus where we are in Manitoba in respect of those making minimum wage. I think that's important to note. And I would suggest that our people here in Manitoba making minimum wage are probably lower now than they were then, given the demand for labor and the fact that employers are having to pay more to attract employees and to keep employees. Just a little more on this sector here. It appears that minimum wage can occur across all industry sectors, but it would appear that the retail trade, the accommodation and food services tend to be the most common sectors where minimum wage employees occur. So I just wanted to pass that on for the member. Going back to 2018, the report said 33% of minimum wage earners in the country worked in retail trade and 26% in accommodation and food services. I would expect those trends are probably probably similar, and probably similar for Manitoba as well. I think the other thing to bring to bear here when we do the Manitoba Labor Market Outlook Report, and this was for the 21-25 period, we were expecting over 140,000 job openings over the next 5 years, and figuring that more than half of those jobs would require post-secondary training. So clearly those folks in this market will not be making minimum wage. And I think the other thing too, and, you know, to my point about labor demand, we have, I think, as of the latest report, we had the second lowest unemployment rate in the country. So clearly there's a demand for labor here in Manitoba, and I would expect as a result of that, Manitoba businesses are being forced to pay more for employees. I think the last report had us at 5% unemployment rate. Again, second lowest in the country, from, if memory serves me correctly.
The Honourable Member for St. Patel.
So the minister doesn't clearly see, I suppose, how increasing minimum wage would perhaps have a positive impact to addressing the labor shortage, I suppose, given his response. But the point I want to address in this question is the fact that, by the minister's own admission, private sector is increasing their wage in order to attract more labor into those positions. So we know that there are some positions, specifically, you know, higher positions above minimum wage, where those wages are increasing by the minister's own admission and statement today. So those wages are increasing. And yet the people at the bottom who are earning minimum wage are seeing very little increase in their wage. And so the policy the minister has of not increasing the minimum wage to keep up with the wage increases we're seeing in the private sector means that we're going to see a wider gap in income inequality in Manitoba. This is the policy that we're currently seeing from this government. And so I want to address this with the minister, that income inequality gap that is continuing to increase. How does the minister justify that, and why doesn't he increase the minimum wage to close that gap?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, I think the member is making a lot of assumptions here, unless he has material to justify his comments here this morning. And quite frankly, if he does, I would love to see those numbers, because that's exactly the type of information that we're trying to ascertain as well. Again, we're referencing information that's a couple years old, and we're trying to drill down to get some relevant information. In respect of more timely information. So if the member has that type of information, I would love to see it. I would suggest the demand itself is creating an increase in wages, and I would think that would pertain to the minimum wage category. Which I'm sure is much less than the 5.6% that was referenced some time ago. So I think the marketplace on its own is driving up minimum wage, and that's why we're curious to try to get some up-to-date information. To the member's question, I did admit we are taking this seriously, and we are looking at our minimum wage, what can be done, and what other jurisdictions are doing. I think the member, I don't know if he's had the opportunity to review legislation that was brought in about 6 years ago that quite frankly does tie our hands to some degree in terms of increasing minimum wage. So it was a cost of living provision in that legislation. And obviously, that's something that we're having a look at, the existing legislation, what could be done to, potentially make increases or at least have a look at it. The industry has told me, the employer side, would certainly like to be consulted on this as we go forward. So I think any movements we do, we would certainly invite consultation from Manitobans on this, and really look forward to having that discussion.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Well, we know that minimum wage is well below the poverty line in Manitoba. Regardless of our cost of living, it's absolutely well below our poverty line. Many other jurisdictions in our country are moving up to the $15 an hour minimum wage, and in many cases, that $15 an hour minimum wage still wouldn't put people up to above the poverty line or into a living wage category. And so the minister's been saying this 5.6% are making minimum wage, and without data, suggesting that it's less than that. I don't know if there's evidence to suggest that it's really less than that. But regardless, the minimum wage, that 5.6%, is below the poverty line, below that $15. And so everyone else who was making $12, $13, $14 is still below the minimum, the poverty line. Increasing the minimum wage up doesn't just affect the 5.6% who are making minimum wage, it affects all the other people who are making just above it and are still below the poverty line and are still not at a living wage. So the minister has to realize it affects far more than this 5.6%. I want to know if the minister can acknowledge that, and if he can provide any numbers to say how many people are working full-time and are still living below the poverty line.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And obviously, we're into some clearly government policy discussions when it comes to establishing a living wage and wages that would meet the poverty line, and that's some of the work that we are undertaking across government to see what other jurisdictions are doing and how our legislation works and how that what the implications would be to making increases. In terms of the direct question about poverty line and employment, I mean that's probably some information that the Department of Families may be able to provide the member. So when the minister responsible for families comes up, that might be a question to direct to families. The one thing that we have found, and this is pre-pandemic versus where we find ourselves this February, so over the course of 2 years, February to February, we have found that the average weekly earnings have gone up 10% in Manitoba. So I can't say for sure that would be reflective of those making minimum wage, but I would suggest that correlation may certainly be in place. So I think that's a signal as we are rebounding from the COVID era. Again, the demand for labor and short supply of labor are clearly driving salaries up. And I would expect that would be the same thing for minimum wage earners. I think the other thing too that the members opposite quite often forget is the basic personal exemption when it comes to income tax. Something that I know the previous government had no interest in raising the basic personal exemption, so those making fairly low income were subject to taxation early on. And we as a government have decided that that's not fair, that we should be at least indexing the tax brackets to at least the minimum increase in consumer price index. So we've done that year after year, and that has taken tens of thousands of Manitobans, low-income Manitobans, off the tax rolls completely. So again, it goes back to my comment about life being more affordable in Manitoba than anywhere else in the country. We're taking those measures to make sure that we're addressing those affordability issues that Manitobans are facing. Clearly now more than ever with inflation and hyperinflation and increase in food costs and gas tax, that's why we think it's so critical to provide as much assistance to Manitobans as possible. And indexing the tax brackets for income tax is certainly critical. We know we have more work to do, but at least we're certainly headed in the right direction on that front. And speaking of assistance to Manitobans, we're happy that the opposition finally came on side yesterday and supported our probably the biggest tax rebate in Manitoba history to property owners in respect of the education property tax. That is probably that will put $350 million into the hands of Manitobans over the course of the next several months. So this is much needed tax relief when it comes to Manitobans, especially in this time of higher costs of living. So we're excited about that. I'm just glad the opposition finally decided to agree with our stance on that and provide those rebates back to property owners. And not only property owners, but those that are renting as well. A significant new policy shift to renters who may be on the lower income spectrum, and I think very supportive of that as well. So I would view that as a step in the right direction, and a $350 million assistance to Manitobans I think is going to be quite timely.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
I'm disappointed that the minister's beginning of his comments couldn't provide any perspective and referred this to the Minister of Families. I know that predecessor had taken an approach and used terms like whole of government approach to solving problems. So I'm really disappointed that now it seems that we're back into these silos where the minister can't reference things that are, even significant related to his department of economic development, but are tangentially also related to a department like families, and the minister won't respond to a question about how minimum wage and the impacts of increasing it up to $15, for example, would have a significant increase in impact on the economy for people who make above minimum wage, but not up to a minimum wage, like $12, $13, $14. And so it's disappointing the ministry won't even make a comment, and the government is still so siloed with some of its operations. But I think the question I want to ask around minimum wage is that it's clear the studies have shown that higher minimum wages, higher wages means more money put back into the economy through spending. Right? And I think that's something that we would want to see. And especially true with the lower income folks, because they use that as disposable income instead of saving it like wealthier Manitobans. So can the minister explain what sort of economic impact and benefit we could see from raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would have on, as the minister said, the 31,000 minimum wage workers in Manitoba? And as well, Mr.
The honourable member for St. Patel to continue.
And that 31,000 number that the minister said is only the people earning minimum wage. Raising the minimum wage would have undoubtedly an impact on all the wages in between. So it would be a much larger number than the 31,000 if we were to raise it up to $15 an hour. Can the minister explain what all that extra disposable income going into our economy would mean for the businesses in Manitoba?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the member's question, we actually are taking a whole of government approach to this, and we did have a wholesome discussion about minimum wage and impacts to Manitobans. So we are taking a whole of government approach to this. I certainly don't have the figures in front of me in respect of his question, and I'm just trying to expedite a solution for him and an avenue to address it expeditiously. But I will say we are taking a whole of government approach to looking at a minimum wage, the impacts to Manitobans, the impacts to the economy, certainly what it means in respect of what other jurisdictions are doing as well. So the work is certainly underway on that front. In terms of the members' questioning, that would be a huge undertaking, because there would have to be a lot of different assumptions made in terms of the impact of raising minimum wage. I don't know if anyone has done that in the country. That's something we'll try to ascertain if that work has been done with governments or with any consulting organizations. But that's that's the work we're prepared to engage in. Now, I recognize the previous government was all about how do we make sure Manitobans are making more money so that we can tax them. That was the tax and spend mentality of the previous government. And in respect of the previous government not indexing the basic personal exemption when it comes to income tax, not indexing the brackets in respect of income tax, taking more money from the lower income Manitobans, and we've taken a different approach. Our approach is to give as many low-income Manitobans assistance. We've taken tens of thousands of low-income Manitobans off of the income tax roll completely, whereas the NDP chose to ignore that. So we're providing assistance there. We have provided additional increases too to different sectors, including childcare workers and those in the CLDS sector as well, recognizing support for them. The other thing is we're working with the federal government in terms of enhancing childcare, providing $10 a day childcare for those Manitobans making lower incomes. We're going to be expanding the childcare subsidy to thousands of low-income Manitobans, which will certainly help those low-income Manitobans. In terms of some of the other benefits, we've provided increased shelter benefits to low-income Manitobans. Rent Assist, EI Rent Assist has been indexed, and $12 million for new income support programs for people with long-term disabilities. So we are taking measures to assist those on low-income families. And probably the single biggest thing that we did as a government was to reduce the provincial sales tax. When the opposition, NDP government at the time, increased the provincial sales tax, that had an impact to Manitobans of over $300 million. And probably the most affected by that were some of the low-income Manitobans. So we've reduced the provincial sales tax. Today would probably be in excess of $350 million we're saving Manitobans each and every year. And again, the low-income Manitobans would be probably the most impacted by the reduction in the provincial sales tax. And in addition to that, we've also taken the provincial sales tax off of a number of goods and services, which again will impact low incomes Manitobans quite substantially. So we recognize the challenges those on low incomes face. At the same time, we are looking at the implications of raising the minimum wage as well.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
I think the minister's last comments kind of show a little bit how out of touch he is with Manitobans, because some of the items that the government has taken the tax off, the PST off, are not the items that an average low-income Manitoban will spend money on. Expensive haircuts, for example. These aren't the average everyday costs that low-income Manitoban earning minimum wage or thereabouts might choose or be able to spend their money on. So I think it really shows how out of touch the minister is with the lived reality of some Manitobans. But just to talk a little bit, just to, want to get the minister's thoughts on what, raising that minimum wage up to $15 would really mean. And I mean, just even rough numbers, or minimum wage in Manitoba is just a shade under $12 an hour right now. If you were a minimum wage earner working 40 hours a week and you worked 50 weeks a year, Minister, the minister ought to know that $3 an hour wage for 31,000 people would be about an extra $186 million flowing through our economy. That would go a long way to boost the disposable income for folks. that would benefit some of those same retail sectors where minimum wage workers are working. And so this has a benefit for the minimum wage workers, has a benefit for the retail sector where there's greater disposable income flowing through our economy. And so I want to know what the minister really objects to raising the minimum wage, which would benefit low-income Manitobans and boost our economy in a time when we need it.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't say I was opposed to increasing the minimum wage, so I just caution the member opposite on that. I'm saying we're taking a whole of government approach to evaluating the implications of the increasing the minimum wage. We've always been a government that consults on issues in respect of minimum wage and other policy type issues with Manitobans, and we will continue to do that. Our government certainly has rolled back provincial sales tax, and we have taken provincial sales tax off of a number of besides haircuts. I mean, everybody, most people will be getting haircuts, preparing wills, any type of insurance or tenant's insurance you want, personal income tax returns, vehicle registration fees have been reduced, eliminated probate fees as well. In fact, our government has provided $886 million in tax savings since 2016. That includes $607 million to families and individuals, another $279 to Manitoba businesses, so that Manitoba businesses can employ Manitobans. We made a commitment of a 2020 tax rollback, and in fact, we've gone above and beyond that. We have provided the average Manitoban with an average of $2,400 in tax savings. That's an average of $4,000 for tax savings per household. So we're taking a lot of measures to make sure that we leave as much money in Manitoban pockets as possible. We know the previous government and their ideology in terms of taxing Manitobans as much as they can. And we've taken a different approach to that. Mr. Chair, we certainly are investing in Manitobans. We've committed in this year's budget over $100 million for the training and upskilling Manitobans. We have delivered employment and training services to over 27,000 Manitoba job seekers to assist them. We've supported 15,000 Manitobans with employment and training services through 13 of our Manitoba Job Skill and Developmental Centers across the province. We've supported 7,500 Indigenous job seekers and more than 7,800 newcomer job seekers were also supported through some of our programs over the past year. We've committed to working with Manitobans to make sure they have the skills that the market is demanding today and the skills that the market will be demanding into the near future. So that's why we're excited about this year's budget. We're excited about the money that we've allocated in this department to assist Manitobans to get to work and to move on and move up in their labor market. So I would say we've taken a whole of government approach on this. We will continue to take a whole of government approach when it comes to the issue of minimum wage.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
I just want to say that I think again, it's completely out of touch for the minister, and quite frankly outrageous to think that a low-income Manitoba who maybe doesn't even own a home would benefit from a tax decrease on probate fees, or can barely put food on their table but would benefit from tax break on an expensive haircut. I mean, this is just this government telling on itself, saying that it doesn't understand the challenges that low-income Manitobans really face. But I'll move on away from the minimum wage debate, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker? Deputy Speaker? Deputy Speaker, thank you. Chair, Mr. Chair, thank you. And I want to just ask about the Community Economic Development Fund. Since 2017, March, it's been under a business loan moratorium, meaning that no new loans have been approved for businesses since then. Can the minister explain why? Clearly, during the last few years of COVID, that there's been a need for business loans to benefit the economy in the north. And it seems that the Community Economic Development Fund clearly has a role to play, but it's under this government not done so in providing business loans for businesses outside of the fishery industry. So why is this the case, and will the minister lift the loan moratorium for non-fishing industry businesses from CEDF?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the Communities Economic Development Fund, that organization is working directly with northern businesses and communities. They are responsible for programs and services that would provide opportunities for business development and growth to companies and individuals in northern Manitoba. The loan component of what they did was only one aspect of the economic development work that the corporation has done in the past, and quite frankly continues to do into the future. The member is correct. CEDF does continue the loan program, financing program for the fishing industry and commercial fishing industry. I think as of December 21, there was 251 loans for over $1.8 million were have been dispersed. So obviously an important component to the commercial fishing sector. I will say, even though the Communities Economic Development Fund is still working closely with communities in northern Manitoba, we have created another department to deal specifically with northern resources and northern development. And we're excited about the work that department is doing. So that department will be working closely with CEDF over time. Certainly my department will be working closely with that department and CEDF as well to see what opportunities exist. Certainly access to capital has been a topic of conversation in Manitoba for quite some time. There is obviously plenty of other lenders in Manitoba that are willing to fill this space. And I think that's an important role for CEDF, is to work with the business community in northern Manitoba, work with the other lenders that are willing to fill this space and provide that type of financing. In the broader terms, we've created the Economic Development Committee of Cabinet, and Economic Development Board to look at economic development opportunities, and we're excited about that. And part of that is to how do we attract investment and make sure that Manitoba businesses have the capital that they need. So we've enhanced our small business venture tax credit program. We've made that permanent to assist Manitoba businesses. And I can say that over the course of the last few months, in meeting with Manitoba businesses, they've been quite excited about that particular tax credit. And a number of businesses have indicated their ability to grow because of that fund. And that allows individual Manitobans to invest in small business companies here in Manitoba. So it's been a very successful program. That's why we've made that tax credit permanent. We've also made it permanent and had the ability for that tax credit to be applicable to the new venture capital fund that we are in the process of establishing. And we have set aside the initial $50 million for the venture capital fund to leverage additional funding from the sector to provide input and capital for Manitoba businesses. So we're excited about having that particular fund and fund of funds operational this fall. I think that will provide additional opportunities for Manitoba businesses, including Manitoba businesses in northern Manitoba.
The honourable member for St. Patel.
Thanks. So the minister referenced the $1.8 million this year from CDF. In 2016, that was $3.1 million. So can the minister explain why there's this drop in funding for fisheries approvals? In addition, the fishing industry, as the minister I'm sure knows, is a seasonal industry. But yet the interest accrued on those loans is all year round. Is the minister interested in looking at the idea of matching that to the seasonal nature of the industry, where they're only getting their income during one time of year and making payments, but they're accruing interest all year round? Is the minister interested in matching that to the seasonal nature of that industry?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think the upside of having CEDF located in northern Manitoba, they do provide those services to the northern business community, and they understand the northern business community, and they do work closely with the individual businesses there and the individuals in northern Manitoba. And they themselves will set policies around lending. And I get it's not all that different than our Manitoba Agricultural Credit Corporation, who provide loans to Manitoba farmers and Manitoba farm business. Again, Manitoba farmers, similar to the fishing industry, a lot of them are on a seasonal basis and quite often only receive their income at one time throughout the year. So that's the advantage of having experts understanding those respective businesses. And certainly appreciate the good work that the people at CEDF are doing and working with Manitobans in northern Manitoba, because they do understand the issues there. And again, very same situation at MACC. Those individuals know the agricultural industry, the agriculture sector. That's why we have experts setting policy as it pertains to the agriculture sector. And it seems to have worked out quite well. So excited about having the experts with the right expertise dealing with local issues, local communities, and really understanding the implications of those individual businesses, whether they be in northern Manitoba or whether they be in rural and the farming area of Manitoba.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's become even more evident than it was before, the need to provide opportunity for women in business throughout the course of the pandemic, with the many struggles that business owners have had, women in corporate world have had during the course of the pandemic, having the extra burden of many childcare issues on top of their responsibilities in to run a business, be an entrepreneur, or perhaps try to climb the corporate ladder, as it were. And so as a result, we want to make sure that women feel very comfortable in the culture, in the business culture, in the community. Make sure that they're welcomed in business circles. So I bring up the issue, this issue as a result of the comments last week that the minister made in front of a business forum. I think that many women, many men as well, and any gendered person might have felt insulted by and not welcome by those comments. I won't repeat the comments today, but I know the minister knows what I'm referring to, the specific words. And I want to know what the minister feels like, and whether he feels like these sort of comments welcome women into the business world, welcome them into our economy, and what he says to those as the leader, as the minister of our economic development, of a leader of our economy in Manitoba.
Just before I acknowledge the minister, it seems to be my microphone is really hot and right on the edge of feedback. Is there a way to turn that down just a little bit so that we're not running that risk? No. I can speak up, yeah. I'll speak a little louder, but that, I think, exacerbates that potential. I'll leave that with the tech people, just a comment or an observation. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, obviously, we're interested in getting Manitoba women into the workforce and becoming business owners as well. So in terms of where we're at now, sort of post-pandemic, the female unemployment rate in Manitoba is 4.8%. And that is right alongside where we were pre-pandemic. So it's certainly encouraging to see Manitoba females getting back engaged in the workforce. This compares to the Canadian average of 5.1%. So we're certainly ahead of the national average there in terms of having females employed. And again, second lowest unemployment rate in the country, so we're encouraged about Manitobans getting back to work. And we know there's tremendous opportunities in the workplace here in Manitoba. Business community has told us that they need labor, and they're actively looking for labor. And I would say they're also been telling us that they're prepared to pay for that labor. So I think this is a really great opportunity for everyone in Manitoba to get to work, and including females. Probably no better time in our history than with all these opportunities that exist for us. I remember meeting recently and going back even several years with the Women's Enterprise Center. Certainly excited about the work they're doing in terms of having women involved in the workforce, and I think there's an opportunity for us to work even more closely with them in the coming months to see what kind of opportunities exist there and how we can help facilitate some of those discussions. And there may be some opportunities within our department to make that happen. Our government has recognized the importance of childcare when it comes to having women employed. And that's why we've been working closely with our federal government in terms of the $10 a day childcare. Again, that will be available for Manitobans, especially those on lower incomes. We'll be expanding the child care subsidy to thousands of other Manitobans. And I think this really provides the network and the opportunity for child care to allow all Manitoba families to engage in the workforce. So as this whole plan unfolds and rolls out over the next while, we're again excited about even getting more Manitobans back into the workforce, because there is so many opportunities for people to work here in Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
I've spoken with many people over the last few days who heard the minister's insulting comments towards women at the business forum last week, and they were too felt hurt by it and felt like it was a sign and a signal that that the business community isn't really for women. That the minister is clearly using his position. It ought to recognize that in his position, the words he says is a signal for the priorities and the words of the government and what the larger business community is working towards. And so when the minister makes comments that might insult women or denigrate women, I think it's to show, I think it will undoubtedly have a negative impact on women's likelihood and incentivization to pursue the business industry or become entrepreneurs or make investments in Manitoba. So what sort of actions are the minister going to take in light of his comments to ensure that women feel welcome in our business community? Will the minister take any sensitivity training?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think I've been very straightforward in terms of my apologies, in terms of my remarks last week at the Business Council. I extended that to members of the Business Council. all members of the House, all Manitobans. So I think unequivocal apologizing for that. Our government, and I go back to my earlier comments, we're trying to do everything we can to allow Manitobans, women and females, to become engaged in the business community here in Manitoba. We're more than happy to have the dialogue with Manitobans, how that happens. So many opportunities here. I would say now more than ever, our government is trying to create the environment to allow all Manitobans to participate in our economy, and just more opportunities than ever before. I would say last week we had a great opportunity to have a discussion about opportunities in Manitoba with the Business Council. The Business Council has similar aspirations as we do. How do we provide investments here in Manitoba? How do we create sustainable employment here in Manitoba? How do we create sustainable growth in Manitoba? And how do we work with the private sector to develop opportunities for Manitobans? And how do we work with our post-secondary partners to make sure that Manitobans are engaged in the workforce? We are committed to strengthen the economy here. We're investing in the economy. We want to build the future of Manitobans. That's what Manitobans have asked us to do. And we will continue to work with the business community, in fact, all Manitobans, to make sure we're providing as many opportunities for Manitobans as possible. Whether that be the Business Council, whether that be the Manitoba Chambers, the Winnipeg Chambers, other partners that we're working with, whether it be Economic Development Winnipeg, CEDF, Rural Manitoba Economic Development, World Trade Center, Women's Enterprise Center. We're certainly prepared to work with all those organizations to make sure those opportunities are provided for Manitobans. We certainly have set aside, again, $100 million in this year's budget to provide training and upskilling of services for the Manitoba labor market. And we want to make sure that those Manitobans have those opportunities to move up in the labor market. And we're trying to create through positive tax competitive strategies that will provide Manitoba businesses the opportunity to grow. When Manitoba businesses grow, that provides opportunities for Manitobans. The reality is, the more productive and enhanced economic activity we have in Manitoba, the more money we have for the social services that Manitobans have come to expect. Such things as our record investment in healthcare of $7.2 billion, our record investments in K-12 education, this year over $3 billion, and our investments in post-secondary, and our record investments in families and social services. All of those things that Manitobans have come to expect. And the only way we pay for those social services is to have Manitobans working and have a robust economy.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that many Manitobans were offended by those comments. Men in business were offended, women in business were offended, and gender diverse folks in Manitoba were offended by those comments. And it creates an environment in our Manitoba economy where women feel like it's maybe not their place to be involved. When the minister and the person in charge of stimulating our economy is making those comments, feel like it gives a green light for other leaders in our economy to make those types of comments that would offend and denigrate women. Sensitivity training would go a long way to educate and enlighten the minister about the things that are perhaps appropriate and not appropriate to say. And so I'll give the minister another chance to answer the question, will the minister agree to take sensitivity training?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, in respect of the members' questions, apologies have been expressed to the Business Council, to all Manitobans. I will say that our government is committed to working with all Manitobans in terms of the opportunities that exist in Manitoba. Just this past year, we invested $50,000 for 2 initiatives that support women pursuing non-traditional careers. The expansion of the Empower program at the Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology to train women in the information and communications technology industries. The program includes a focus on increasing Indigenous women's representation. We have support of the Manitoba Construction Sector Council to promote careers for women in the heavy construction industry in partnership with the River East Transcona School Division. And just last August, our government announced an investment of more than $600,000 to partner with the Manitoba Construction Sector Council to deliver a skilled trades training initiative for Indigenous women in 4 northern and remote communities. This particular initiative will provide an opportunity for Indigenous women to acquire valuable skills in a supportive environment and includes ongoing mentorship during training and throughout their careers. So certainly we are making investments for women in the workplace, and we look forward to continuing that particular work. I will say, as we continue to spur investment here in Manitoba, again, opportunities abound for allowing people to get back to the workplace. Our $50 million venture capital fund is a really tremendous opportunity for Manitobans in the near future. Some of our tax credit policies that we have now made permanent will create more opportunities for all Manitobans to participate in the economy.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, taking sensitivity training would not only go to help educate the minister, but it would also set a really good example that leaders in our business community who make mistakes can learn and get better. And if the minister showed willingness to take sensitivity training, I think it would go a long way to encourage other leaders to do the same and improve on themselves and make the business community in Manitoba a more welcoming place, not just to men, but to women and gender diverse people, to ensure that our economy is benefiting from all attributes of all peoples in our Manitoba. So I've asked the minister twice about whether he's willing to take sensitivity training, and he hasn't committed to doing so. So I asked the minister, why not?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, I appreciate the line of questioning. The member goes down here, and I have offered my apologies to the Business Council, to the Chamber, to the Premier, to my caucus, and in fact to all Manitobans. We, as government, will continue to work with the business sector. We'll continue to work with all Manitobans to provide opportunities.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's clear that multiple times I've asked the minister if he's willing to take sensitivity training in light of his comments, and he hasn't answered, and he also hasn't answered why he's hesitant, why he's refusing to do so. And so I want to ask then, and if that's the case, if the minister is not willing to really better himself and be an example for the business community, especially for women, in light of his comments, then what is he actually going to do to regain the trust of women in business, diverse people in business? What is he going to do to regain their trust, to regain their respect after his comments, and to ensure that we do have a welcoming and business environment in Manitoba? What is the minister going to do if he's not willing to take sensitivity training and not willing to answer why he doesn't want to take that training?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we all have the opportunity to learn by our mistakes. I've certainly recognized that. I've admitted that publicly. It was an error in judgment, and apologized unequivocally for those comments. I've had numerous conversations with the Business Council subsequent to that. I think they are prepared that we will move on because we do have great work that we have to do here in Manitoba in a time of great opportunity. So we are committed to doing that.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
So, in the estimates book on page 22, in point 9, strength and respect in our workplaces, there's a new performance measure, which is 9.A, achieve an annual target percentage of department employees who have completed mandatory respectful workplace training. New measure with a target of 90%. Will the minister himself take this training?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I will say our government is working to enhance the respect in workplaces. I know the previous government had some issues there, and we recognize the challenges that the previous government had faced. So we've taken some proactive measures to enhance the respect in workplace. Further in our estimates book, we talk about equity and diversity benchmarks as well. And this department, we'd set a benchmark of having 50% women employed. And as of this February, we had 79% of the employees in economic development, investment, and trade were female.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you. I'll have to ask the minister again. Maybe he didn't understand the question or didn't hear it because he clearly didn't provide a response to my specific question about an initiative in his own estimates book, performance measure, that a new goal to achieve an annual target percentage of department employees who have completed mandatory respectful workplace training. I would like to know if the minister, in light of his comments and sensitive comments toward women last week, if he himself is going to be taking this training, which he has a goal of 90% of the department achieving.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From going by memory, I believe I did take this course at one point in time, but I'm probably due to take that course again, and I will endeavor to undertake that.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Thank you. So, of course, if you've taken a training before, refresher is always needed, and I think in light of the comments, I'm glad to hear that the minister is planning on taking this workplace respect and work training, which I think would go to signal that we need to increase and improve the culture of welcoming women, gender diverse people into our business community at all levels of our business community. And so I'm glad to hear that the minister is planning to take this training. And I look forward to the next opportunity, perhaps in estimates, next opportunity we have in next year to follow up, to ensure that this training was done as a leader in our community, in the business community, in the economic development world in Manitoba, has taken the training to hopefully encourage other people to take similar respectful workplace training in Manitoba. So I'm glad that the minister is going to be now doing that in light of his insensitive comments towards women. I'll move over to talk a little bit about some of the budget cuts that we've seen. And while the minister might quibble with word cuts, as he's done in the past, I respect that. But I will ask the minister, can he provide an explanation why funding for industry programs and partnerships has decreased from $55.5 million in 2021-22 down to $42.7 million in 2022-23?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the member for raising this important question, and it does give me an opportunity to clarify this budget line item. This budget line item is directly related to COVID-19 assistance. So the member may know the federal government provided one-time funding over the course of 2 years for COVID-19 economic recovery efforts. So this funding was used to successfully support time-limited employment and training initiative for workers and employers impacted sectors. So the $47 million was over two budget years. The last budget year was reflected approximately 16 million of that. So again, we'll say for reference, approximately $16 million was used from the federal transfer to support businesses in Manitoba. That federal support is no longer available in this fiscal year. So that is why you're seeing that net reduction of approximately $16 million on that particular budget line.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
So, in the years prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the amount for industry program partnership was still higher. And so this is a decrease that's obviously not just related to the pandemic, because prior to the pandemic and the budget years before that, the amount was higher. So can the minister explain the decrease from even pre-pandemic levels of this budget line?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Certainly recognizing that we've had a change in departments and change in structure of departments. And I'm not sure what documentation the member is referencing. If the member could provide us a copy of the documentation that he's referencing, obviously that sounds like it's going back pre-pandemic, so a number of years. It would take us some time to determine exactly what line item he is referencing. Again, given the fact that we've had different departments, different budget items in terms of supporting business. Again, this one item, when we call it financial assistance, we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So if the member has a certain document that he's referencing, for us to do the homework on that and ascertain the answer to his question would be very helpful if he would provide that documentation to us.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Sure, I can table this now. From the 2020-2021 budget.
Order, please. The tech has just died on me here. I know the member always wants to stick within the time limits, and suddenly our timer has died, so, oh, there we go. We're back. We'll just reset things here. The time has not changed, but the timer is now back in order. So, the honourable member for St. Vital.
So this is tabled from the 2020-2021 annual report, where the estimated amount for the industry programs partnership was budgeted at approximately $56 million. So that was set before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And so I'm wondering why now we're seeing the cuts from this program. In addition, can I make it
Sorry, when you pause, they turn the mic off, so I have to recognize you again. If you'd like to continue in your question, you certainly have 4+ minutes on the clock. You're welcome to ask.
Since I've tabled the document,
The honourable member.
Okay, the honourable member for St. Vital, go ahead.
Mr. Chair. So I've asked the minister about why there is that decrease in the number for our industry programs and partnership from the years prior to the pandemic to what we're seeing now. My additional question is, in the table document from the annual report, there seems to be a math error in the estimated line for the estimate of 2020-2021 when it tables out the amounts for salaries and employment, other expenditures, financial assistance, grant assistance, and other expenditures recovery. The total amount, if we add those lines individually, is not the total of $56.381 million. It would amount to a higher amount. It just doesn't add up, literally. So I'd like the minister to clarify, are one of these individuals' numbers incorrect? Or perhaps is that total incorrect?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there does appear to be an error in the 2021 annual report there, for sure. In terms of the actual and the 37 million, that piece is reflective of the federal government support. So hopefully that helps clarify that particular line.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
So clarifying that the minister said that the grant assistance line should be updated to account for federal government support. The minister's saying that that line is.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital to continue the question.
Thank you. The minister saying the grant assistant line of 37 million approximately is correct, and then the total on the where it says subtotal appropriation should be higher, about approximately $75 million. And then as a result, as a course of the pandemic, that amount, what actual number differed, and then now the budget line is $42.7 million in the current budget. So I just want to clarify what the error is, whether the subtotal should be higher or whether this grant assistance line is incorrect.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just trying to work through process here and timing and how these figures were arrived at. It certainly appears in the report, though, the total sub-appropriation of 56 million is an error. That's the way we see it. And again, the estimates column is an estimates, and that was based on what the department would have a best guess at what the federal transfer would look like for COVID support. So those are the best guess numbers, I would say, in terms of the estimate line. I think probably the reality is to focus on the actuals, what numbers were spent. From what we can tell, those numbers that are reported in the actual category are correct. Hopefully that helps clarify for the member.
The honourable member for St. Vital.
Thank you. So clarifying that subtotal appropriation should be higher. Adding the numbers up, I have 75 million 208. If I add those up, just the numbers there, right? That means that if that's your estimation in the 2020-2021, which would have been set, before the pandemic, now we're looking at an estimate on this year's of 42,692,000. That's a significant cut. That's a cut of $32.5 million from a budget that was set pre-COVID to one now. That's a massive drop. And so I'd like the minister to explain what accounts for this massive change in funding for our industry programs and partnerships.
The Honourable Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think what the member is comparing, if he looks at the current estimates book, is the 80 million set aside last year versus the 67 million this year, representing a 13 million decrease. And again, most of that is applicable to the reduction in the federal government support programs for COVID, because we no longer, in this year, will be receiving, to our knowledge, federal COVID support for programming in Manitoba. As a result, that's why you'll see the decrease in expense revenue for this broad sub-appropriation.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
I want to thank the Minister for answering my questions today. I'll provide some time for the member for St. Boniface to ask some questions.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
St. Boniface.
I'm sorry. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you. I was flattered there for a moment. Yeah, thank you very much. It's nice to have an opportunity to ask some questions. And I do really just want to focus on as much as possible on the estimates and just get some background on some of just some follow up on some of the proposals that have been discussed. So I'll just start with the small business venture capital tax credit. You've got a baseline and targets. The baseline is 12%, then it moves to 25%. Just, you know, I know that there are challenges for some small businesses accessing. Can the minister say, you know, those seem to be low targets, but also explain, if possible, what the challenge has been around about subscribing to that, or why do we have a low participation rate of 12 to 25% in the small business venture capital tax credit? If there's any accounting or explanation for that.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member for the question regarding this important tax credit. So the targets in the book, and I think it's important I explain the targets in the book first of all. So when a business approaches us, they will determine a level of funding that they want to be available for the tax credit. And then, once we approve that, then it is up to the company to ascertain and find that investment. So what we were saying, the baseline target for I guess right now we're at a 12%. And we want to enhance that, quite frankly. I mean, that's the whole idea of providing a tax credit, is to seek additional investments there. I don't know exactly why we're not achieving greater rates right now. That I haven't heard that from Manitoba businesses. The businesses that I've been hearing from they're excited about the tax credit. They're now excited about the enhancements where we've made this a permanent tax credit to them. And we've also made it applicable to the new venture capital fund as well. So in context, this would be the 21 tax year. 25 Manitoba businesses have raised $19.1 million through this particular tax credit. So that's where we're at as of 2021. Hopefully now that we've made the signal that this is a permanent tax credit, we'll attract more investments for Manitoba businesses.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know, and there was an innovation growth program, and I just wanted to follow up on that because I had a constituent who had some challenges just because it seemed to be that there were there was a very high bar. They're actually a local manufacturer. They were all things. But they ended up being they ended up being denied funding in part because of it was essentially the burden of paperwork that they were quite surprised in that the levels of paperwork or demands that needed to be requested. So I was just wondering whether there had been many challenges in terms of that, or in terms of, or had there been any changes to the innovation growth program? Just because I know that they were surprised, and I'll see if I can find the specifics of it. But it was called Prairie Velo. They build accessible self-powered vehicles for people with disabilities. It's all built here, but they were having trouble accessing the fund simply because of the very high bar that was placed. They were on that. So I was just wondering if you'd had any feedback, or if you'd received any feedback on challenges around the innovation growth program, just in terms of essentially obstacles, or just a very high bar being set in order for people to qualify for funding.
The Honourable Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for raising this particular question. This is a relatively new program designed for the small and medium enterprises. It looks like I think it's in the past year then, we had 16 Manitoba companies approved for $727,000, so there has been some success to date. Clearly, from a government perspective, we want to balance simplicity with, at the same time, protecting taxpayers. So again, this being a relatively new program, the department has gone back one-on-one with the companies that were successful and the companies that were not successful. So we have recognized there was some challenges, so the process will be streamlined, and in the very near future there will be new applications coming forward as well. So to the member's point taken, and recognize there's some challenges and remedial action will be taken.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and just I have found it. I found the reference. It's not in terms of a question, but just for the minister's information. Was that the application required proof of matching project funding, but the applicant in this case was providing in-kind contributions which were not treated by the program as matching funding. And the major challenge was it said that corporations funded via share equity have to have at least $25,000 in retained earnings. The balance sheet showed $100 in common shares and $5,100 in retained earnings. But certainly for a small business, that would have been normally that would have been reasonable. So that was it. It was just that was the specific obstacle. So I did see that the government is bringing forward a $50 million program for venture capital, which is excellent. I was just wondering, just in terms of, I understand that there are a number of different reporting entities. I was just wondering how is because it's MTA that was selected to deliver it. I was just wondering how was MTA selected and why MTA rather than say one of the other reporting entities like an Economic Development Fund, Economic Development Winnipeg, or the Manitoba Development Corporation, or the Rural Manitoba Economic Development. Why do it through MTA rather? How is MTA selected, and why do it through MTA rather than through one of these other existing organizations?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for raising this important question. We are excited about the new venture tax, or the new venture capital fund for sure. We're in the process of putting the bylaws around the actual fund and the mechanism itself, and that's going to take us a few months to develop. In the meantime, we need some advice in terms of establishing that structure. And we set up a small group to assist us in making sure we get the structure and the bylaws correct around that particular fund and that corporation, the management corporation there. In the meantime, we have the money set aside. And given that the structure, the fund itself hasn't been established, we needed a mechanism to hold the money and then work with us in developing that structure. And we did look at a number of different options for that for this short period of time. We're quite optimistic we will have the fund functional this fall. So the Manitoba Technology Accelerator is an organization that is experienced in working with entrepreneurs and certainly emerging companies, and they're playing in that field, quite frankly, right now. So they're very familiar with the venture capital field, and they're also familiar with the prior to venture capital, the angel investors. So they're certainly in that space on a regular basis. They do have expertise over there at the CEO level for sure that can help us in terms of making sure we get the actual venture capital component right. So we're just using that organization to, in fact, hold the money for now and then provide advice to make sure that we get the actual venture capital fund correct. With the intent that the money will be hopefully transferred to the new venture capital this fall and be operational.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for that answer. Yeah, just there's a question on reconciliation and diversity training that on page 16, it says it'll begin to track the number of employees who've completed mandatory diversity and inclusion training. But the goal is 70% for this department, and in some other departments it's 90. So I'm just wondering why that's why is it different than what other departments might be? On
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thanks for pointing that out. Clearly, we did have quite a vacancy in the department, and we're in the process of hiring a number of staff. So certainly it's our expectation to get as many people through that program as possible. I expect this target is pretty low. We'll certainly go back and have a look at what other departments are doing, and that's, to me, a target that certainly could be reassessed for another year.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. And just a question, I guess, on unemployment, which is always it's a big issue, but there are two issues. One, I think, is that, our unemployment rate, I think it's been going up a little bit. One is that we see an out-migration of Manitobans, right? So that sometimes your unemployment drops or your labor force can shrink. But the other is around First Nations employment. So, and I know this is a challenge that is actually in some ways, so one of the questions is that when we measure unemployment, this is a problem with the federal government, that Statistics Canada does not measure unemployment on reserve, right? So I'm wondering if that's something that, so in a sense, and you have reserves where there can be very high unemployment. I was just wondering whether, we could talk, that all parties could come together and challenge the federal government to start measuring unemployment on reserve. But is that something that you might consider? Or certainly, because this is it's a sense that if you're not measuring it, we can't pay attention to it. But this is a challenge because my concern is that we end up understating. Well, first of all, they're all Manitobans, and second, we end up understating the actual levels of unemployment. And I know that it's not for the provincial government, or whether that's something you might consider looking at, just in terms of getting a more accurate picture of unemployment and what we have to do to respond to it in Manitoba.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, the member raises a very valid point. Especially now where we find ourselves in a labor shortage in, quite frankly, pretty well every sector of the province and every region of the province, including northern Manitoba. To me, this is a real opportunity to engage Indigenous population in the labor force. And quite frankly, the member's right. It has been a challenge going forward, but we have taken some steps as a government to try to assist in that through training and other programs. We have had a number of very serious discussions with our post-secondary schools in terms of how can they help us in this endeavor. And the member may know I was in this role 6 years ago, and my deputy at the time was Jamie Wilson. And we had this conversation a number of times. And I'm happy to see Jamie is over with Red River College, Red River Polytechnic now. So ideally focused on this particular issue. So we're serious about trying to make that happen and work with our post-secondaries to see what we can achieve on that front. So thank you for raising that.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer. Yeah, because because it's not being measured, it's sort of there's a real risk that it ends up being overlooked by everyone, right? By us, but with the federal government as well. So it's this argument of acknowledging that there's this issue here that needs to be addressed. And just, I guess my last question is that we have a new Economic Development Board Secretariat Office. Just how is that different in terms of engagement or structure than the Economic Development Office that was in place since 2016?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. And to the question about venture capital fund, I have a quick 2-page brochure here that I think will help the member understand the venture capital, how it will be established, and I'll get that over to him before we leave today. So, yeah, the concept of the new Economic Development Board is to make sure that we're attracting investment and that we're trying to make decisions at the speed of business as opposed to the speed of government. So the Premier will chair the actual committee of cabinet, I'll vice chair, and there'll be 6 other ministers there. Recognizing that when companies come to either new to Manitoba or existing companies that want to invest, they have to deal with a number of departments. So the concept is to get those departments at the table to try to address those issues. So if we meet on a regular basis, address those issues as quick as we can, and then move on. So the committee will be supported by a secretariat. Michael Swiston has come on to be the secretary of that secretariat. And the secretariat will be composed of, it'll be relatively small, concise, and ideally nimble, so that we can respond to these businesses quickly. We will bring on some of the existing people in economic development from across different departments. And then we'll also be bringing in the private sector to help as well, probably on a contract basis, as needed with the right skills to assist that particular industry in moving through the system. So quite a bit different. We're still going to be working with the department and our external partners, Economic Development Winnipeg, Rural Economic Development Corporation, CEDF. We just have to make sure that everybody understands their role and responsibilities, and then how do we all work together to make sure we're not overlapping and duplicating services. So the secretariat will be responsible for some of those, I would say, more challenging, more intricate business that having to deal with the whole of government. So that's the concept.
Are there any further questions? Seeing no further questions, we will now turn to the resolutions. Beginning with the second resolution, as we have deferred consideration of the first resolution containing the minister's salary. At this point, we will allow virtual members to unmute their mics so they can respond to the question on each resolution. Resolution 10.2. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $67,099,000 for economic development, investment and trade, industry programs and partnerships for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 10.3. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $92,010,000 for economic development, investment and trade, workforce training and employment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 10.4, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $2,157,000 for economic development, investment and trade, economic development board secretariat for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 10.5, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $8 million for economic development, investment and trade, loans and guarantees programs for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 10.1A, the minister's salary, contained in resolution 10.1. At this point, we request that all ministerial and opposition staff leave the chamber for the consideration of this last item. The floor is open for questions. The honourable member for St. Vital.
I move that line item 10.1A, minister's salary, be reduced to $33,600.
The motion is in order.
You read it back first and say it's in order.
The honourable member for St. Vital has moved that line item 10.1A, minister's salary, be reduced to $33,600. The motion is in order. Is there any debate?
Is the committee ready for the question?
Seeing none, is the committee ready for the question? Shall the amendment pass? I hear some no's. All those in favor say A. All those opposed say nay. I think the nays have it. The honourable member for St. Vital.
On division.
On division. Resolution 10.1, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $10,586,000 for economic development, investment and trade, administration and finance for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. This completes the estimates of the Department of Economic Development, Investment and Trade. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supply is for the Department of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
No, we're not going on. So ask the committee what was the
What is the will of the honorable member for St. Vital?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I canvass the committee to see if it's the will to call it 12:30?
You can. Is it the will of the committee to call it 12:30? Agreed. The time being 12:30. Committee rise. Call in the speaker.
You have to put your jacket on.
That'd be me.
Can't anyway unless you get the Full session. He's not here yet.
The hour being 12:30 p.m., the House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Have a great long weekend, everybody.